All right, looks like everyone is pretty much in, so we're going to go ahead and get started so we make sure we have time for everything today. And I'm Bonnie McFarland. I'd like to welcome you to our 22-23 School Site Council training. Just a reminder, this is designed as a training for trainers for district and school level staff who have responsibilities for support and oversight of the School Site Council and development of school plans. So you'll be receiving information and resources to meet the requirements for the council and the school plan for student achievement that you can take back and use with your councils. So this is two parts. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the School Site Council and advisory committees and their responsibilities and roles and requirements associated with those groups. And then at our next session on Thursday, we're going to look in depth at the school plan process and the school plan for student achievement, the process for developing it, and the role of the council in that. So that's going to be an in-depth, and that's going to be, we're going to add an extra half hour on that. It'll be a little bit longer on Thursday. So today we're going to hear from most of our team. You're going to hear from Adrian Balcazar, Debbie Kano, Rachel Garcia, Helen Choi, and Anita Lomeli. And Jeannie Keith is also with us and will be supporting us with answering questions and she's been giving us guidance along the way. So the team is all here for you. So let's take a look at the topics for today. Today we're going to include a review of the School Site Council, including selection, composition requirements, and responsibilities of the council. And then we're also going to look at the responsibilities and role of various advisory committees at both the school and the district level, and their responsibilities and relationship to the school plan for student achievement, as well as the LCAP or local control and accountability plan. So both councils and committees will look at the similarities and differences and their roles. Next, we're going to look at the role of procedures, bylaws, and documentation and the importance of those and what needs to be in place. We'll also address the additional role of the council in developing the comprehensive school safety plan. And then we're going to finish up by looking at the federal program monitoring requirements and how the California Department of Education reviews school site councils and school plans, and some of the things, some hints for you to be prepared for in terms of federal program monitoring. So that's our agenda for today. And as you one other resource that we have is a School Site Council handbook. If it includes an overview of School Site Council requirements, it goes into all the things we're going to talk about today: selection procedures, bylaws, talks about advisory committees, does look at the school plan development process and everything associated with that, and also addresses the advisory committee's role in the LCAP. Also included in that binder is a flash drive, which includes resources that you can use, samples, agendas, and various items that you can actually copy and use for your district. If you already have a copy of this, you really don't need to purchase another binder. It is available for purchase at the link that's there. There's a few new resources in it, but anything that's new, we're going to be sharing with you today and or tomorrow throughout this training. So you won't be missing anything. If you have the most recent one was the 2021 publication. So check your handbook. If you have that copy, you're good to go. You don't need a new one. There were significant changes in legislation. I believe it's 2019. So if you have anything before that, you probably need to get a new one because there were a lot of changes there. So right now the book is actually in printing. So if you order it, there'll be a slight delay, but we'll get one out to you as soon as possible. So just an update on the handbook and whether or not you need it, that's your call. All right, questions today. If we have questions, that are quick and simple. You can look in the chat. We'll have someone monitoring the chat, but we really like to, our process has been to get a Q&A out after the meeting so we can make sure we get clear responses, because oftentimes when you go into, when you ask a question, it sounds like a simple question, but there's a lot of ifs and ands, and we want to make sure we get it right. So we will send everyone attending, we'll get a copy of that Q&A. All right, I think now that is it for the kind of overview, 1, 2, 3, what we're up to. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Anita Lomeli, who is going to start out at a look at the purpose, the makeup, and the role of the council. Anita?
Thank you, Bonnie, and good afternoon, everyone. In this section of the presentation, we'll be taking a look at school site council requirements, including roles and responsibilities, composition, and selection. To begin, however, some of you may have wondered why school site was written as a compound word in the previous slide. Was this a spell check error, you wonder? We have seen many districts and schools use the acronym SSC to denote the 3 separate words of school site council. When researched further, however, we found that dating back to the early 1970s, California's Ed Code referenced school site as one word. So for the purpose of this presentation, we will be referencing school site as a closed compound word to keep in line with how it is written in Ed Code. However, we know that the English language evolves over time. For example, when the word online was first introduced in our everyday language, we hyphenated that word. Now we simply remove the hyphen when we spell the word online. The new spelling does not change the meaning of the word. Such is the case with school site council. Whether school site is spelled as a closed compound word or 2 separate words, the purpose of the council remains the same. Why establish a school site council? Policymakers and researchers across the country agree that those who are involved with schools and students on a day-to-day basis, the teachers, parents, other school personnel, and students themselves can make some of the best decisions. This is why, as legislation has been added or amended or repealed over the past 50 years, the establishment of school site councils under specific circumstances have remained steadfast in California's Ed Code. A word of caution and hopefully inspiration, when seen as a requirement per Ed Code, school site councils can be simply a compliance mandate that satisfies a what and a how. On the other hand, if we think about a school site council inside out and first describe it with our why, we can inspire others in our school communities to view and join a school site council with purpose, cause, and belief. Beginning with our why inevitably leads to decision-making on the part of a council that can greatly and positively impact the education of its students and school community. Successful school site councils, regardless of their specific agendas, are more than a rubber stamp committee. They believe and know why a school does what it does and why it offers the programs that it offers. Their impact on the entire school community can be life-changing. When is a school site council required? Although all school sites are able to form advisory councils or committees on their own, there are specific circumstances when the formation and implementation of a school site council is required. Per Ed Code Part 38, Section 65000B, a school site council is required when a school operates a program funded through the consolidated application and that requires a school plan for student achievement, also known as the SIPSA or SPSA. LEAs ensure in the CONAP that the SIPSA has been prepared in accordance with the law, that school site councils have developed and approved a SIPSA for each school participating in programs funded through the CONAP process. The main responsibility of the school site council is developing and approving the school plan for student achievement. This process includes annually reviewing and updating the contents of the plan, including proposed expenditures allocated to the school through the consolidated application and the local control accountability plan, if applicable. In addition, the SIPSA must be developed with the review, certification, and advice of the school's English Learner Advisory Committee, the Elac, if required. And finally, the school site councils approve and recommend the SIPSA to the local governing board for approval. Additionally, the school site council is responsible for annually developing the comprehensive school safety plan unless this task is delegated to a school safety planning committee that meets Ed Code requirements. The Ed Code is listed here on this slide for you. What is the consolidated application? In case you're not familiar with it, the consolidated application, also known as the CONAP, is an agreement between the LEA and the California Department of Education for the distribution of categorical funds. An LEA is defined by Ed Code section 64000A as a county office of education, a school district, or a charter school. The CONAP has two parts: the spring submission, which is due each June, and the winter submission, which is due each February. Part 1 in the spring documents participation in federal grant programs for the coming year and provides assurances that the LEA will comply with the legal requirements of each program. Part 2 in the winter contains LEA entitlements for each funded program. The expenditure budget pages in the school plan for student achievement must match the CONAP school site allocation pages in the winter submission. And next slide, please. And in case you're wondering, this slide shows the federal programs that are included and distributed through the CONAP. Title I, Part A, Part C, Part D, Title II, Part A, Title III, Part A, Title IV, Part A and B, Title V, and Title V, Part B, and Title VI, Part A. Please keep in mind your district or school may not be participating in all of these federal programs. Most of what we will be referencing with regards to the School Site Council and the SIPSA has to do with the Title I program. Currently, no state programs are funded through the CONAP. In the past, we have had state programs funded through the CONAP, such as EIA, SCE, and EIA LEP funding for those of you who might recall these programs. However, please note that AB 716 from 2018 allows for the possibility of future state programs being funded through the CONAP. Next slide. In these next slides, we will be taking a look at school site council requirements, including composition and selection. The School Site Council is a selected group of school site representatives. One group includes classroom teachers, selected by classroom teachers employed at the school, and other school personnel employed at the school who are not teachers, selected by other personnel employed at the school. The school principal or his or her designee is also included here. Classroom teachers must represent the majority of persons in this group. The second group completing the council includes parents of pupils attending the school, selected by parents of pupils attending the school or other members of the school community, selected by parents of pupils attending the school. At the secondary level, students also make up the composition of the council. These two groups together make up the School Site Council, always ensuring parity between the two groups just mentioned. Next slide. As previously mentioned, the composition requirements for School Site Council members are established in Ed Code 65000. The School Site Council in an elementary school shall be composed of two groups: school staff members and parent community members representing parity. That is, equal numbers of members between the school staff members and the parent community members. Here, using this visual, you can see that half of the School Site Council must be composed of school staff, which includes the principal or her or his designee, classroom teachers employed at the school, and other school personnel employed at the school who are not classroom teachers. The classroom teachers selected must also constitute the majority of the school staff members. Given that classroom teachers have to make up the majority of the staff members on the council, the minimum number of teachers required is 3. The other half of the school site council must be composed of parents of pupils attending the school or other members of the school community. Again, per ed code, the number of parents and/or community members selected must be equal to the number of school staff members selected. This means that the minimum number of school site council members at an elementary school is 10. For example, 1 principal or his or her designee, 1 other school personnel, and 3 classroom teachers, and 5 parent and/or community members. Next slide. At the secondary level, the school site council must be composed of the school staff member group and the parent and/or community and student member group. The staff composition requirement for secondary schools are the same as the staff composition requirements for elementary schools. So the school staff members must include the principal or his or her designee, classroom teachers employed at the school, and other school personnel employed at the school who are not teachers. Classroom teachers selected must also constitute the majority of the school staff members. On the other half of the council composition at secondary schools, this includes parents of students attending the school or other members of the school community and students attending the school. The minimum number of school site council members for secondary school is also 10. For example, 1 principal, 1 other school personnel, well, principal and his or her designee, 1 other school personnel, 3 classroom teachers, and then 5 parent and/or community members and student members. Keeping in mind the composition requirements that were shared for elementary and secondary schools on the previous slide, this chart displays a few options for school site council compositions. In the first column, you can see that the minimum number of school site council members to meet composition requirements is 10 at both the elementary and the secondary level. The school site council can be larger as long as it meets the composition requirements, including parity or equal number of staff members and parent community members at the elementary level, and equal number of staff members and parent/community members and student members at the secondary. Thus, with a 12-member school site council, you can see that there must be 6 members on the staff member side and 6 on the parent or community member and student member side. Also, in that scenario, you can also see that there must be 4 classroom teachers to ensure classroom teachers make up the majority on the staff side. Please note that middle school may, but is not required to, include pupil or student representation. Next, Helen will take over with some additional information about members.
Thank you, Anita. We will now go more in depth into each member of the SSC. The principal or his or her designee is the only member of the school site council who is not elected. The principal or the designee has the voting right on the school site council, however, may not veto any decisions made by the council or make changes to the approved school plan without the approval of the council. The role of the principal on the school site council is to set the vision and provide the school context, as well as provide information and resources to support the council with the development and the implementation of the school plan. The principal should support the work of the council by leading from the side, while also ensuring that the decisions made by the council align with the school and district's policies and vision. Although Ed Code allows for a principal designee to serve on the school site council, it's recommended that the principal serve on the school site council. Some of the benefits to the principal serving on the council are that it sends out the message that the work of the SSC and the development of the SPSA are important, and also demonstrates the value of the shared decision-making. The principal also plays an important role in ensuring alignment between the school and the district's goals and priorities. It also provides opportunity for the principal to build relationships with parents and the community, and the principal plays a key role in linking the strategies in the school's plan to student learning. Next slide, please. We sometimes get questions on who are considered classroom teachers or which staff are included in the other school personnel. Classroom teachers are those who provide direct instruction for full time of employment. For example, you may have intervention teachers that provide direct instruction full time. So they could be included as a classroom teacher. Or you might have an intervention teacher that provides direct instruction part of the day and supports PLC or PDs on the other half of the day. So these teachers will be considered other school personnel because they don't provide direct instruction full time. Other school personnel basically includes any employee at the school who is not a classroom teacher, such as assistant principals, counselors, clerical staff, custodians, yard supervisors, and instructional coaches. There is also sometimes confusion that other school personnel only applies to classified staff. And this is not the case because certificated personnel who are not classroom teachers, such as counselors, may serve in the other school personnel category. Your board policies or bylaws should also address this so that it's consistent throughout the district. Next slide, please. Parent members of the school site council includes all parents or guardians of students enrolled in the school. The only exception to this is that parents who are employed at the school may not serve in the parent group side, but may serve on the staff side. If the parent is employed by the district, but does not work at the school site, then the parent may serve on the parent side. A community member is a member of the school community who is not employed by the school and is not a parent or guardian of a student attending that school. This should also be defined in the Ssc bylaws or district policies. It's also important to note that community members have to be elected by parents of students attending the school, and therefore community members cannot vote for Ssc candidates. Next slide, please. As mentioned, at the secondary level, students are required to serve on the parent community student group member side. The option to serve on the school site council must be open to any student enrolled in the school, meaning the school or the district cannot set an additional qualification for membership. So for example, the school cannot say only students with 2.0 GPA or higher can serve, or it cannot be assigned as a responsibility to an ASB member. Student members on the Ssc must be elected by the entire student body, and the election must identify the responsibilities to serving on the council. Next slide, please. So per ed code, and as mentioned previously by Anita, Ssc members must be selected by their peers. Again, this means that classroom teachers must be selected by classroom teachers. Other school personnel who are not classroom teachers must be selected by other school personnel who are not classroom teachers. And parents and community members must be selected by parents of the students attending the school. And at the secondary level, students attending the school are selected by students attending the school. Since members must be selected by their peers, no seat on the Ssc may not be reserved for any group or individual. Ed code does not specify how many members are selected by their peers, so this can be done through a ballot process or in an open meeting. Individuals may also self-nominate. For the student members at the secondary level, a separate election must be held in which entire student body has the opportunity to select their student members. Again, Ed code does not specify how many students must be on the school site council, so it should be defined in your bylaws. As a reminder, parent members may not be employees at the school. So while a parent who teaches at their child's school cannot be selected to represent the parent side of the school site council, they could be selected to represent the staff side as a teacher. Some schools also elect non-voting alternate members who are seated as voting members in the event of a midterm vacancy. So technically, an alternate members are not official members and would not be included on your Ssc roster or membership unless there is a vacancy. This is to ensure continuity and to avoid having to hold another election to fill in the spot mid-year. This is something that should be addressed in your bylaws or district policy. Next slide, please. Here are a few examples of things related to the selection of Ssc members that you may want to consider in your board policy or Ssc bylaws. What is the process that will be used to select Ssc members and officers? How long will Ssc members and officers serve? For example, is it a 2-year term or is it a 1-year term for officers? What is the process for providing notice of election for each of the required groups? What are the responsibilities of the council? What are the responsibilities of the officers? And another consideration is a policy of non-discrimination. While not required, it is suggested that a board policy or Ssc bylaws address these issues as they come about all of the times. We will now be taking a look at bylaws later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So Ed Code 65001 allows for some school site council exceptions for small schools. These exceptions previously required from waivers from state board, but no longer require waivers per Assembly Bill 716. The first exception is that schools with a common site administrator may operate a shared school site council if the school site has less than 300 students. The second exception is that up to 3 schools with a combined population of less than 1,000 students may operate a shared school site council if the schools have a shared campus or if the schools have geographic proximity to one another and similar student populations. With both of these exceptions, shared school site council must still meet the composition requirements that were explained earlier by Anita in this presentation and specified in the Ed Code 65000. Next slide, please. Another exception is that schools with fewer than 300 students may operate a Ssc that has all of the following: 1 principal, 1 teacher selected by teachers, 1 other school personnel selected by other school personnel, and 3 parents or community members selected by parents at the elementary level, or if a secondary school, then 2 parents or community members selected by parents of the students attending the school and 1 student selected by students. For this exception to occur, it requires approval from the local governing board and the local bargaining unit. Additionally, a school district governing board or county board of education may request on behalf of a school site council that the state board grant a waiver of any provision related to school site councils. Next slide, please. And finally, remember that training for Ssc members is necessary to ensure members understand their roles and responsibilities. This training needs to ensure that members understand their legal obligations and the requirements outlined in the Ed Code for school site councils. Members need trainings on GRAIN Act requirements to ensure that the council follows the requirements for holding public school site council meetings and conducting business at these meetings. Other possible training topics include bylaws and meeting procedures, what Title I program is and the requirements for school-wide programs and target assistance programs, the purpose and use of state and federal program funds, how to analyze student achievement data, evidence-based instructional practices, and monitoring and implementing and evaluating the effectiveness of the plans and strategies. The training topics will really depend on the needs of your school site council, and it will help them to fulfill their legal responsibilities. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Debbie for advisory committees.
Thank you, Helen and Anita. So now I will review the other advisory committees, which are both site and district level. Next slide, please. So the legal requirements are in place to ensure the traditionally voiceless have a voice. So try to remember that the legal requirements are the minimum that you are required to do. But we want you to consider this. Think about your endeavors. Do you strive to do minimum and expect to yield excellence, or just to get by and check the boxes and to be able to say you did it? Or do you give your attention and effort to achieve excellence? It is likely that as educators and leaders, you rarely strive to achieve the minimum. So as you go forward and do this work, we want you to remember why these legal requirements are in place And your approach to this work will make all the difference in the product you yield. Minimum input will check the boxes. Strategic and purposeful interactions will develop partnerships and give parents a voice. Next slide, please. So starting with the Elac, which is the English Learner Advisory Committee. It's a school site committee. The only selection requirements for Elac is that Elac parent members must be elected by parents or guardians of English learners. In terms of composition requirements, the parents or guardians of English learners must constitute the same percentage of the Elac membership as the percentage of English learners in the school. So this means that if 60% of the students in the school are English learners, then at least 60% of the parents or guardians must be parents or guardians of an English learner. Parents or guardians of EOs or RFEPs may serve on Elac as long as the percentage requirement is met. Next slide, please. And per Ed Code 52176B, an Elac must be established at a school site that has 21 or more English learners. Elac responsibilities include advising the Ssc on programs and services for English learners for inclusion in the SPSA, assisting in the development of school-wide needs assessment, and efforts to make parents aware of the importance of school attendance. And the Elac must have the opportunity to elect at least one member to the Dlac, or the District English Learner Advisory Committee. Next slide. Elac members must receive training materials and training to assist them in carrying out their required advisory responsibilities. Training must be planned in full consultation with committee members. Elac members must be trained on their roles and responsibilities. They should also receive the Green Act requirements, bylaws, and meeting procedures to ensure members know how to conduct an effective meeting. It's also important to consider what might Elac need to know to advise on programs and services for English learners and the school plan. What do they need to know to assist in a needs assessment? Again, training must be planned in full consultation with members. So it is important to work with the committee, talk to them, and determine their needs and plan trainings accordingly. Next slide, please. The Elac may delegate its responsibilities to another site level committee, such as School Site Council, if the Ssc parent composition meets the Elac composition requirements. There are specific steps that must be taken in order for an Elac to delegate its responsibilities to another committee, such as the Ssc. First, an Elac must be elected, trained, and informed of its responsibilities. Then the Elac may then vote to delegate its responsibilities to the Ssc for a period up to 2 years. The Ssc would then need to be informed of the Elac responsibilities and vote whether they accept these responsibilities or not. If the Ssc accepts the Elac responsibilities, the Ssc would be responsible for fulfilling the legal requirements of both the Ssc and Elac. And after a specific period of time, not to exceed 2 years, an Elac must be elected again. And the process repeated. Next slide, please. So now Dlac, which is a district level committee. It's the District English Learner Advisory Committee. A Dlac is required when the school district has more than 50 English learners. And the Dlac must be composed of a majority of parents of English learners. So each school will have a school level Elac, and the Dlac is comprised of school level Elac members who have been elected to serve on Dlac. The Dlac, like Elac, has specific advisory responsibilities, to advise the local governing board on tasks here on the screen, which may inform the training that the Dlac will need to fulfill their responsibilities. And some of the topics are similar to those of the Elac, but are at the district level, such as planning for programs for English learners, and at the district level, the EL master plan and the needs assessment. Also, if the Dlac serves the dual role and serves as the EL PAC for the purpose of the LCAP development process, the committee must then also carry out the responsibilities of both committees, which we will discuss a little later. Next slide, please. Dlac members must receive training materials and training to assist them in carrying out their responsibilities, their advisory responsibilities, just like Elac. And as with the Elac at the sites, training for the Dlac should be planned in full consultation with the committee members, which means that you get their input and develop their training accordingly. Next slide, please. Ed Code requires that LEAs present the LCAP as part of the process to the Parent Advisory Committee, which includes parents of students of English learners, foster youth, and low-income students. Every LEA will need to convene a PAC, or Parent Advisory Committee. For LEAs that have at least 15% English learners and at least 50 pupils who are English learners, the LEA must additionally convene and present the LCAP to an English Learner Parent Advisory Committee. There is no requirement to establish a new or separate English Learner Parent Committee for this purpose. We find that many districts will use their Dlac to fulfill this responsibility, which is completely acceptable. It should be clear, though, within the LEA that the Parent Advisory Committee and the EL Parent Advisory Committee, so the PAC and the EL PAC, are two separate committees, and these presentations are presented, the LCAP is presented separately to each of these groups. And now I'm turning it over to Rachel.
Oops,
Nope.
this is me first. Okay, this is Bonnie, and we're going to take a look at procedures, bylaws, and documentations, the importance of having particularly procedures and bylaws in place. The success of a council's work is largely dependent on having clear procedures that are understood by all at the beginning of the year. Clear procedures can even the playing field by allowing all voices to be heard, especially in groups like the Schoolsite Council, where you may have different levels of knowledge and experience with the school programs and with the content and processes of working in meetings. So having clear procedures helps everyone's voice be heard. Bylaws are a proactive way of resolving conflicts and solving problems. And we'll take a look at those first. Bylaws are sort of when you say, what would we do if? And bylaws answer that question. So let's take a look first at bylaws. Okay. Many questions and disputes that come up regarding school site councils, ELACs or Dlacs, and how they operate and make decisions aren't addressed in law. And we often get calls when a disagreement on the council comes up or something's called into question, and we're asked, what's the correct response? And our answer usually is, what do your bylaws say? You can see by the first note up there, they're not required by law, but they're definitely important for a well-functioning committee and to not have to deal with issues every time one arises. So there are some basic things that should be included in bylaws, such as, and some of them were mentioned previously by our presenters, how vacancies are going to be filled, what officers are you going to have on the council, what role do they play? Additionally, your bylaws can outline the duties of officers and council members and include processes for how you select officers. Some things are included based on issues that have arisen. So we suggest that each year you look back at what happened that year with your council and what are the things that you had to deal with that you didn't have an answer for. That's what should go in your revision for your bylaws for the coming year. In addition to bylaws that are selected by the school site council, the district may outline procedures for school site councils to follow. So you can follow other district on some issues. The district might say, this is how we want councils to, for example, conduct elections or selection process. So those things can be in the district policy, but bylaws are essential for each of your schools. School site council procedures may be governed by your, as I said, district policies and bylaws. And just to reinforce, bylaws not required, but highly recommended. And a good source for bylaws is people who've been around and work with school site councils for a while, project directors, principals who have seen things that have come up and said, gosh, I wish we'd had that in our bylaws. So in most cases, those would have been resolved through having clear bylaws written. So update those annually. So next, let's look at procedures. And actually, we're going to look at two types of procedures. Some are legally mandated procedures, and then there's other local, more operating agreements. So some of the procedures that must be followed are in Education Code 35147, which is generally referred to as the Green Act. That's by a senator, a state senator years ago, Leroy Green, whose name got connected with it. So everyone still calls it the Green Act, but it is in Education Code. They were developed specifically for council, school level committees, councils, as opposed to governing bodies like school boards and city councils. So there was obviously a need for something different for groups like school site councils. That's how these came about. They're different because they're less stringent than one you may have heard of, which is called the Brown Act, which refers to official government decision-making bodies such as school boards. And we'll take a look at the differences in those in just a minute. The Green Act outlines 6 requirements for school site council, primarily related to public notification, access to meetings, and procedural safeguards. So first, any meeting held by a council or committee must be open to the public, and any member of the public has to be able to address the council or a committee on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. So you can see that's more limiting than what a school board might deal with. It's just what's in the jurisdiction of the council or committee. A notice has to be posted at the school site or other appropriate place. So again, not as broad a posting, but it must be at the school site or where parents and community have access at least 72 hours before the set time of the meeting. And the notice per the Green Act has to specify the date, the time, the location of the meeting, and contain an agenda describing each item that's going to be discussed or acted upon at the meeting. The council can't take any action on any item of business unless that item appeared in the posted agenda, unless there is an exception. If something came up after the agenda was posted and there is a need for immediate action and there is unanimous vote to put it on the agenda, then it can be added. However, that can be contested by a member of the public, but it is possible to do that. All right. Let's see, questions or statements. Oh, excuse me. Yes, you do have to, at a subsequent meeting, you would also want to address any actions taken that weren't on the agenda. Questions or brief statements that someone on the council makes that don't have a significant effect on pupils or employees and that can be resolved just by providing information don't have to be on the agenda. So it's primarily actions you're going to discuss and actions that you're going to take action on. Upon demand of any person, the council or committee has to reconsider an item at the next meeting after allowing public input if something came up at that meeting and a member of the public contests it. So now let's take a look, just a comparison, and there's a handout for you on this that compares the Brown Act and the Green Act, and you'll see there are some similarities, but the difference. Remember, Green Act is education code, and it is just for your councils and committees. That's the Green Act. Brown Act is in government code, which is different from education code and applies to all government bodies. And you often hear this. Sometimes you'll hear something on the news. Somebody had a Brown Act violation. And so that's different from the Green Act. So the general purpose you'll see outlines who it applies to. That just defines who do each of these apply to. A decision making, fairly similar, except for the public meeting requirement is a bit more stringent for the Brown Act. For government bodies, they have to be totally public meetings, and whereas you have to have access for the public to councils and advisory committees. Posting is fairly similar, but if we go to the next slide, you're going to see some significant differences. All right. Public access, again, a little bit more stringent for the Brown Act. Communication, this is one that's significantly different. For under the Brown Act, members of the body are not able to discuss items outside of the meeting that they're going to be addressing or acting on in the meeting. That restriction does not apply to the Green Act. The second is the violation restrictions, and that is, you'll notice for the Brown Act, that includes possible criminal charge against members if they violate an action in law, and they did so with the intent of limiting right to access. And you note that that does not apply to the Green Act. And that was important in writing the law, that they ensured that that was not the kind of thing. Imagine how challenging it would be to get people on your council if they thought they were going to be under criminal penalties. So they are not. The other difference is teleconferencing. We'll talk about that later. There were restrictions that were addressed through the governor during COVID, and those applied primarily to the Brown Act because there were a lot of restrictions relative to teleconferencing that had to be overcome. There are no restrictions on teleconferencing for those entities under the Green Act. So those are some significant differences in those. And let me see, I believe there's one that's just continuation of this was AB 361, which is what was under the teleconferencing, and it was pulled back for Brown Act. So there's more limitations, but again, no restrictions for school site councils. All right, next slide. So procedures, we also said procedures, Green Act, that is the legislative mandated procedures by law. But procedures also include rules that are more like working agreements that provide parameters on how business is conducted. And as we said, rules of order also support equity on the council, making sure everyone's voice is heard. This is really a challenge on a council, particularly because you have school staff on there who may be very knowledgeable. They know the acronyms and the school language. You have parents on there who may not know that or may not be familiar with meetings and how they operate, placing a motion. So these procedures are really important to bring that council together. Councils often follow Robert's Rules of Order or some variation of those rules. The rules should support the work of the council, and therefore they need to be clear and not overly burdensome. So a lot of people take Robert's rules and they sort of condense them or make a simplified version. Part of the training for school site council members should be meeting procedures. So don't assume everyone understands the procedures, and you need to go through them. Because it's a formal meeting, members should follow agreed upon procedures for conducting meetings. Okay. And you may even wish to have a parliamentarian who checks on the rules, someone who's that's going to take on their role. Wait a minute, are we following our procedures and the rules? Considerations, some things just to think about in terms of your rules of order, working agreements. How are they developed and reviewed? Where are they documented? Is it written down somewhere? Is it in a notebook you have? And what training is provided for your members? All right, next slide, we'll take a look at documentation. So documentation is also important to maintain because your council meetings are subject to review, which you'll hear about later in federal program monitoring. So it's part of compliance monitoring, and it's important that documentation accurately reflects the actions of the council. So questions about elections should be documented, and also official correspondence, so that should be kept somewhere, agendas, meeting minutes, and evidence of actions taken by the council, input from your advisory committee, how the school site council evaluates the plan is something that you're going to want to have documented. How do they obtain input from the Elac? Is that documented in both the Elac minutes and the school site council minutes? If you were asked, how did you get input from the Elac? Your minutes should reflect that. If an election's contested, it becomes especially important to have that documentation. Sometimes say, we didn't think that the process was followed. You need to have that documentation. To make sure your council addresses all requirements in law, it's important to provide them with direction regarding the content of the meetings and make sure the actions are captured in the minutes. So providing a standardized agenda and a format or template for taking notes for the minutes can be helpful to whoever's doing that. That brings us to who takes the minutes. It's important to determine who's responsible for taking, maintaining documentation. Where is it kept? Is it kept in an online portal? Is it kept somewhere in the principal's office? Where do you maintain all that documentation? The agendas we talked about as being part of that on the next slide. Agendas and minutes. You'll see later that some of the evidence for federal program monitoring or FPM are going to look at minutes and agendas. So it's important to think about how they're going to be taking, who's taking them, and how are you training that person. As we mentioned, some districts provide templates for the minutes to help the schools. Another consideration is how agendas and minutes are reviewed and maintained. Someone at the district level should be reviewing school site council minutes periodically to make sure they're accurately reflecting the actions of the council and they would be comprehensible to someone who was not at that meeting. You also want a system for maintaining documentation, so when it's needed, you know where it is. Having schools post or review minutes after each meeting can be helpful. That way you can access them. Someone from the district can look at them online, and sometimes schools get good ideas from each other when they look at each other's minutes. When you're asked to upload the school site council minutes for federal program monitoring, and Adrian will talk about this more later, but you need to make sure you identify those places where the specific issues are addressed. And that's a good way to review your minutes, is to look at them in line with the compliance monitoring instrument to say, are our minutes capturing all the things that are going to be looked for? Okay. So given the importance of minutes to program compliance, it might be advisable to think about who's taking them. Some districts or schools might have the school secretary or someone with experience taking minutes assigned to the task, so the other members can participate fully in the discussion. But that's, again, up to you to think about, but just make sure that someone is capturing them and has training. And then the minutes from prior meetings should always be reviewed by the full council and approved by the council to ensure they actually accurately reflect what occurred during the meeting. We mentioned virtual, and we're going to take just a look at that next. Whoops, well, so sorry, missed one there. Yes, this is just a list for you, all the things that should be included. You can see why a template would be helpful to make sure that they have a place for date, time, who was there, motions and such. So this is just a good little checklist for you to use to look at your minutes. All right, next is, now we're looking at virtual, and we talked briefly about virtual, but when using a virtual platform for your meetings, it's just important to make sure you're still maintaining documentation for the meetings. So are you recording audio or video from the meeting? How are you doing? What kind of sign-in are you doing? It's good to have a visual or verbal roll call, so you know people are actually there. That's one thing. If people are turning off their screen, are they really there and participating? To document actions taking when members vote on an action, it's a good thing to put that in the chat, so then you can download the chat and keep screenshots of that, so you can add that to the minutes. How are you getting signatures on things if you need a signature on various areas? But some things to consider are things like your translation needs for virtual meetings, and be prepared for that depending on your community. How are you going to ensure a quorum? What are you doing to ensure everybody's there, and check on that? And bottom line, you just need to make sure that all meeting requirements that are in law are met, even though you're doing it in a virtual format. So you really need to, I think the next one is plan ahead. And how are you going to plan ahead for all of these things? How are you going to plan ahead? Things like sign-in sheets, approving actions, signatures. Just think of all the things you're required to do in a face-to-face meeting. And are you prepared to meet all those as you move into a virtual environment? All right. And I think that is going to move us into Rachel and looking at the comprehensive school safety plan.
Thank you, Bonnie. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Bonnie mentioned, in this next section, we'll be taking a look at the requirements for the comprehensive school safety plan. Next slide, please. So California Education Code requires every kindergarten through grade 12 public school and public charter school, including community and court schools, to develop and maintain a comprehensive school safety plan designed to address campus risks, prepare for emergencies, and create a safe and secure learning environment for students and school personnel. And requirements related to the comprehensive school safety plans are specified in Education Code sections 32280 through 32289.5. It's also important to note that in a school district with fewer than 2,501 units of average daily attendance, there may be one comprehensive school safety plan for all schools within the district. Next slide, please. So Education Code requires that the comprehensive school safety plan be written and developed by the School Site Council. However, the School Site Council also has the option to delegate this responsibility to a school safety planning committee that meets specific composition requirements that are specified in Education Code. So this includes the principal or his or her designee, one teacher who is a representative of the certificated employee organization, one parent whose child attends the school, one classified employee who is a representative of the classified employee organization, and other members if desired. Now, if a school does not have a school site council, then this responsibility would be fulfilled by a school safety planning committee made up of the members that were just noted. Another requirement is that the school site council or the safety planning committee is required to consult with a representative from a law enforcement agency, a fire department, and also other first responder entities each year when developing or updating the plan. And any updates made to the plan during the year must also be shared with these entities. And this requirement to consult with the fire department and other first responder entities, in addition to law enforcement agencies, it became effective January 1st, 2019 through Assembly Bill 1747. Additionally, it's important to note that all school staff must be trained on the components of the safety plan. And so this means that the updated school safety plans should be reviewed and practiced regularly by all certificated and classified staff. Next slide, please. So the contents of the Comprehensive School Safety Plan are outlined in Education Code 32282. And there are many required components that must be included in the plan, as well as some components that are encouraged or recommended per Education Code. Everything listed on this slide, as well as on the next slide, falls under what's required per Education Code. So the plan must include an assessment of the current status of school crime committed on the campus and at school-related functions. And this might include a review of data such as office referrals, suspension and expulsion data, attendance rates, or SARB data. The safety plan must also include strategies and programs that provide and maintain a high level of safety, as well as address the school's procedures for complying with current safety laws. And this includes child abuse reporting procedures, disaster procedures, procedures to allow a public agency, including the American Red Cross, to use school buildings, grounds, and equipment for mass care. Also, suspension and expulsion policies and procedures to notify teachers of dangerous students. Next slide, please. So here we see a continuation of the required components, and this includes the discrimination and harassment policy, the school-wide dress code that prohibits students from wearing gang-related apparel if the school has adopted such a policy, procedures for safe ingress and egress of students, parents, and staff, also school discipline rules and procedures for conducting tactical responses to criminal incidents, as well as procedures to prepare for an active shooter based on local needs. Next slide. So schools are required to update and adopt the plan by March 1st of every year. Additionally, the School Site Council or Safety Planning Committee must present the plan at a public meeting at the school site prior to adopting the plan. And this is to allow for public opinion regarding the plan. And this may occur at a regular parent meeting. There are also notification requirements in Ed Code that specify that the School Site Council or Safety Planning Committee must notify in writing specific persons or entities, if available, of the public meeting. And you can see those specific persons or entities listed on the slide. The school safety plan must also be submitted to the school district for approval. Now, there is no specific deadline in statute for the school district or the county office approval of the plan. However, the CDE recommends that plans be approved by the district or county office at the next board meeting after approval by the school, or as soon as practicable before October 15th. And school districts and county offices must also notify the CDE by October 15th of each year of any schools that have not complied with the school safety plan requirements. It's also important to note that the approved comprehensive school safety plan must be readily available for public inspection if requested. So some considerations for this include posting it on the school or district website, or maintaining a binder with a copy of the plan and related materials for inspection at the school site administration office. So it will be important to develop an internal process for public inspection of the plan, including identifying any appropriate school staff to assist with this process. Also keep in mind that sensitive technical response information should be redacted and not made public. Next slide, please. The CDE created a comprehensive school safety plan tool to assist schools in developing and updating school safety plans. And here you can see a screenshot of the first 2 pages of this tool, as well as a link to the document. The checklist includes the school safety plan requirements, as well as suggestions and resources for various components of the plan. Next slide. So statute requires the CDE to develop and post on its website best practices for reviewing and approving safety plans. As a result, the CDE developed this webpage, which provides a lot of information and resources, including the requirements for the comprehensive school safety plan, recommended components for the plans, and best practice considerations for schools, districts, and county offices. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, we've included just a few of the best practice considerations recommended by the CDE for districts and schools. So some of the best practices for districts include assigning a liaison to schools to oversee school safety planning, implementation, and emergency management, coordinating emergency response drills with local first responder agencies, and also providing guidance, training, support, and oversight to schools, as well as providing a template for the school safety plan. Some of the best practices for schools include discussing the school safety plan and role-playing possible scenarios at both certificated and classified staff meetings. Also conducting lockdown, shelter in place, and other evacuation drills. And ensuring that all staff and substitute teachers receive information and materials related to school safety procedures. So again, these are just a few of the best practices, and there are several others that can be found on the CDE webpage mentioned on the previous slide. And that concludes my section, so I'll now turn it over to Adrienne.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so now we are coming towards the end of our day one, and we are going to end with federal program monitoring. As mentioned earlier, if you know the why for each of the federal programs, this should help you in meeting the legal requirements. And so to ensure the proper implementation, there is a review process known as the Federal Program Monitoring, otherwise known as FPM. What is FPM? Well, there are federal and state laws that require the California Department of Education to monitor the implementation of categorical programs. The LEAs are responsible for creating and maintaining these programs and must meet the minimum fiscal and programmatic requirements. And on the other side, the state is responsible for conducting the reviews in order to ensure that the LEAs are spending the funding as required by law. The FPM process consists of 3 components. Your participation in the 3 parts depends on which review format you have been selected for, online or on-site. So part 1 is the review of specific evidence via the California Monitoring Tool, or the CMT. And this is for all reviews online or on-site. Part 2 and Part 3 only apply to on-site reviews, which include classroom observations of your program implementation and interviews with the administrators, staff paid with Title I, and your Ssc and Elac. This is the FPM cycle schedule by school year. So as shown for each LEA, the cycle is every 2 years, online and then on-site. All the LEAs in the state are placed in one of 4 groups or cohorts, A, B, C, or D. So for the 22-23 school year, Cycle A is up for an on-site review, and if you are in Cycle C and have been identified, you are up for an online review. The FPM reviews require evidence to be gathered and uploaded to the CMT so that the FPM reviewers can review. The evidence that needs to be uploaded can be found in the FPM instruments. Each federal program has its own instruments, such as the Compensatory Education, also shortened for ECE, or EL, the EL English Learner Program Instrument. Both contain many items that are related to the School Site Council and advisory committees. The link at the bottom of the slide will take you to the CDE's webpage that has all of the FPM instruments for download. If we take a look at the top 5 non-compliant CE items from the 21-22 FPM reviews, you can see here that 4 of the 5 most frequently non-compliant items directly involve parents. The most frequent findings noted with red stars were the CE5, School Site Council composition, CE2, School Parent and Family Engagement, CE6, School Site Activities, and CE19, School Site Evaluation of Program Effectiveness. So if we take a closer look, starting with CE5, School Site Council composition, the evidence that is requested are records of School Site Council peer selections. And for this, it would include a completed sample ballot with peer selection results for each membership category. And note that your completed sample ballot must include the school name, School Site Council membership category, and the date of peer selection. And just another note that blank ballots do not meet the legal requirements. It must be samples of an actual peer selection. You must also provide a School Site Council roster with the membership categories indicating the staff and the parent community student groups, and a copy of the SIPSA. Here is a table with all the required documentation needed for the review of the records of School Site Council peer selection. Each School Site Council must have a selection process to allow your educational partners to select their peers. You must also maintain the evidence of the nomination forms and any notices that are sent out to classroom teachers, other personnel, parents, community members, and students at the secondary level. Ballots with names of nominated candidates and the meeting minutes, online voting records, etc. Also, keep in mind that student names must always be redacted before uploading, not only on just on ballots, but any document that is uploaded into the CMT. Here are some common pitfalls with the composition of School Site Councils. Parent members. Is it clear that everyone knows who can be a parent member? Parity. Remember, parity must be maintained between the school and the parent community student members on the School Site Council. Also, teacher majority. Teachers must make up the majority of the school group serving on the School Site Council. So when issues arise in dealing with these, what can you do? What does Ssc say? And lastly, as mentioned before, what do your bylaws say? It's important to be informed so that you can be aware and you can be proactive in these areas that are common pitfalls. During a FPM review, your school site composition may be found non-compliant because members were not selected by their peer group, there were no election procedures in place, or the election procedures were not being followed. Seats were being reserved for individuals or positions or groups. And again, as mentioned earlier, for example, on the secondary level, if a reviewer finds that an ASB student officer was automatically given a school site council role as part of their duties, this would be a finding. And therefore, you would not have a viable school site council at the secondary level. Another reason would be there was not a written process for replacing members unable to fulfill their term. So just because you don't have enough members doesn't give you the excuse to not have a compliant school site council. And lastly, parents who were employed at the same site as their children and they were serving on the parent community side. This also has been a finding. The next item involving parents is CE2, the school's parent and family engagement. And the evidence that is requested for this item is the school parent and family engagement policy, the school parent compact, the joint development of the school level parent and family engagement policy and compact, school records of activities for building capacity for parents and family engagement, and evidence of the annual distribution of the policy and compact. In CE2, you could be found non-compliant because the school parent and family engagement policy did not address the elements that are required to be in there, or there was no evidence showing that the policy and compact were jointly developed with your parent groups. Also, there were no evidence showing the school level parent and family engagement being annually distributed. And the school parent and family engagement policy had not been approved by the local governing board. The next non-compliant item is CE6, and this is school site activities. The evidence required for this item for school-wide Title I programs are the SIPSA and evidence showing how the school site council developed the SIPSA. And if your school is a targeted assistance school program, the evidence required for this item is a summary of the program and a program summary expenditure report of the Title I school site activities. In CE6 school site activities, you may be non-compliant in school-wide programs if the SIPSA did not address or include a description of the methods and instructional strategies that strengthen the academic program. And again, they're specifically looking for this to be addressed in the SIPSA. Or the LEA did not provide evidence that their local governing board approved the SIPSA. And if you have a targeted assistance school program, the LEA did not provide professional development to staff who work with eligible students. So these are some common findings that took place in last year's FPM reviews. CE19 is the school site evaluation of program effectiveness. And in this item, the evidence that is requested is your school site council participating in the evaluation process in school-wide programs, site level Title I program evaluation and other evidence. And this would include evaluation reports and other evidence in your school-wide program. And something for both targeted assistance schools and school-wide programs, evidence showing the progress monitoring and program revisions. So what has been evaluated, what has been monitored, and what changes are going to be taking place as a result of that analysis. In CE19, there are two main areas that can be pitfalls. It is in the annual review and analysis of the Title I program and the involvement of your school site council. So how is analysis included in your process? And how is the school site council involved? What can you do to ensure that your school site council is involved in the annual review and analysis? Well, here are some evaluation questions to address this part of the process. Can you answer these questions? What points of data do you gather? How faithfully was the program implemented? What is the analysis of the data? How effective was the school plan? And what changes should be made to make this activity effective? School site council evaluation of program effectiveness may be non-compliant if there was no evidence of the Title I actions being evaluated for effectiveness. And this would include the level of implementation, any supporting data, modified actions, or new actions. If there's no changes, this could be seen as no evidence of the evaluation happening. Another reason may be if the submitted SPSA inadequately described the evaluation or the implementation or the impact of these Title I funded actions and services. And lastly, you could have a finding if there is no evidence that the school site council was involved in the analysis and evaluation process. Therefore, there's either missing school site council agendas, minutes, or there are no reflection of this process taking place in the school site council agenda and minutes, as well as the interviews did not affirm the school site council was involved. So how do you prepare your school site council and Elac for an FPM review? We highly recommend scheduling mock interviews as part of your parent training. Here are some real-world sample questions for the mock interviews, such as basic questions about being a member of the school site council and Elac, or what kind of training they have. Can they articulate that? What is their involvement in the development, monitoring, and review process of the SIPSA? A lot of times they do it, but they don't know or they don't have the vocabulary. So again, it's making sure that they understand. And if you have it on your agenda and you talk about, now we're going to develop the school plan, now we're going to monitor, now we're going to review the process. And so again, being clear about what part of the process is taking place is part of that training for your parents. And lastly, what opportunities have been given for input on the site's parent and family engagement policy and the school parent compact? Here are some final thoughts as we end today's session. How are your parents and families engaged in school activities? How is your school site council involved in the development, monitoring, and revision of your SIPSA activities? What would your evidence and interviews reflect? We want to thank you for joining us today and want to remind you to join us for part 2, which will focus on the school plans for student achievement on Thursday, October 13th from 2:30 to 4:30. Again, noting that it's going to be going a half hour more. And here are the topics we will be covering: the SIPSA, the school-wide program, comprehensive needs assessment. I think there was a question in the chat that asked for that. Please come back on Thursday because we will go in depth with that and give you some more information regarding that. Evidence-based interventions, resource inequities, steps to developing the SIPSA, CSI, TSI, and ATSI in school plans, and the alignment of your LCAP and SIPSA. And so again, we want to remind you to please come back for part 2 on Thursday. And that concludes today. We'll leave the chat open for a few more minutes for you to place any last minute questions. Have a great afternoon and we'll see you on Thursday.